Hey guys, happy Wednesday. Today's math lesson, we are doing lesson 89. It's on page 460 of your math book. And today we are actually going to be estimating square roots. And we've already talked about how to get the square root of something. It is, you have to come up with a number that is multiplied by itself to get the answer of whatever is in the square root box. Now, some of these numbers are perfect squares, which means that the answer is not a decimal or a fraction. However, some of them are irrational numbers, which means that there is no perfect square root. So what we've done so far is perfect squares. So just as a reminder, perfect squares, numbers that have a perfect square, or numbers that have perfect square roots, no decimals or fractions. So if I was to look at the square root of 36, to get the answer to that, it is going to be a number multiplied by the same number to get 36. And just from speaking from experience, I know that 6 times 6 gives me 36. So the square root of 36 is 6. And I can even put in parentheses 6 times 6 equals 36. So that is why I know that my square root is 6. Okay, and then let's say I have 400. 400 is another perfect square. So I know 20 times 20 gives me 400. So the square root of 400 is 20. And I can write in parentheses 20 times 20 is 400, just so I know where that came from. So both 36 and 400 are perfect squares. That's because their square root answers are not a decimal or a fraction. They are both whole number answers. So they are perfect squares. Now, let's talk about irrational numbers. And irrational numbers are probably going to drive a few of you nuts because you want the exact answer. And unfortunately, irrational numbers, they do have an answer, but it takes a long time to get there without a calculator. So there's actually a simple way that we're going to write our answer. So irrational numbers, I'm going to just draw a line right here just to separate perfect squares and irrational numbers. Irrational numbers are numbers that don't have perfect square roots. Square roots that end with a decimal or a fraction. Now, like I said before, this is nearly impossible to do on paper. You would need to have a calculator in order to figure out the real square root of an irrational number, which I'm not going to make you do. So, right here, square root of 20. Even though 20 is an even number, it is still an irrational number. There is no answer that can be multiplied by itself to get 20. And you can try, but you're not going to find one. So what I need to be thinking about is I need to get as close to that as possible. So I'm just going to go through some answers here. 1 times 1 is, of course, 1. So that means the square root of 1 is 1. And then 2 times 2 is going to give me square root 4, because 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is going to give me square root 9, because 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is going to give me 16, or square root of 16. So I'm getting closer to 20, because 16 and 20 are pretty similar. So let's do this again. So let's move on to the next number, 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is the square root of 25. Notice how I jumped from 16 all the way to 25. That's because there is no perfect square root of 20. So 20 is somewhere in between the square root of 16 and the square root of 25. So the way that I would actually write my answer is between 4 and 5. And that's all I have to do. So that's how I get my answer, between 4 and 5. Because 4 times 4 is square root 16, 5 times 5 is square root 25. Those are the closest numbers that I can get to square root 20 without using a calculator. So what this is meaning is between 4 and 5, realistically, if I used a calculator, it would be 4 point decimal, 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 decimal. And I wouldn't be able to solve that on paper if I wanted to actually do this quickly. So, point is, we can never guess the actual square root without using a calculator because it would be a very large decimal number. So the answer that we write is the numbers that it is between, and that's it. So square root of 3, okay, I'm going to use just the same list right here. So I'm going to be looking for square root of 3. And I don't know about you, but I don't see square root of 3 in any of these little boxes here. But I do see a square root of 1, and I see a square root of 4. Those are the two closest square roots to square root 3. So then 3 is going to be between square root 1 and square root 4. So my answer for the square root of 3 is somewhere between 1 and 2. So that's my answer, between 1 and 2. And that's how I would literally write it. Now realistically, if you use a calculator, it would be 1 point something, 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 something. But we're not going to do that on paper. So let's do a few more examples. So let's say that I'm trying to get square root 70. So I'm going to, once you get really good at this, guys, you can kind of pick up when it gets close to 70. But for those of you that are still having trouble, if you just want to go through every single number and multiply it by itself, then whatever that answer is the square roots. Okay? So again, 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16, 5 times 5, 25, 6 times 6 is 36, 7 times 7 is 49, so I'm getting a little warmer to 70. 8 times 8 is 64, okay, so that's really close. 9 times 9 is 81. So there is no square root of 70 between 64 and 81. So that means that 70 is an irrational number. So because 70 is between square root 64 and square root 81, my answer would be between 8 and 9. And that's what I wrote, between 8 and 9. And just a little reminder, there is no perfect number that can be multiplied by itself to equal 70. Okay, so let's do 30. So again, 1 times 1 is square root 1. 2 times 2 is square root 4. 3 times 3 is square root 9. 4 times 4 is square root 16. 5 times 5 is square root 25, so I'm getting a little close there. And then 6 times 6 is, of course, square root 36. Now again, 30, there is no 30 in here. But 30 is between 25 and 36. So my answer would be between 5 and 6. See how that works, guys? Hopefully this is coming to you now. Between 5 and 6 is my answer. Now let's do one more together, and then I'm going to turn y'all loose on homework. Square root 12. So again, until you get more comfortable, you can just go through the list. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16, and I'm going to stop there because I'm looking for square root 12. Do you see a square root 12 on any of these lists? No. But square root 12 is in between square root 9 and square root 16. So that means that my answer is between 3 and 4. And that's it. Now, if this is still really confusing to you, what I would actually suggest is that you grab a calculator and that you actually put in square root, whatever the number is, square root 12, square root 30, whatever it may be. And you're going to get some kind of decimal number. Now, if the decimal number is in between the two numbers that you think the answer is, then you are on the right track. Okay? So, in other words, square root 12 should be 3 point something, something, something. The square root of 30 should be 5 point something, 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 and so on. So again, as always, if you have any questions, ask me on Zoom, text, or email. And have a wonderful day, guys.